Redditor 1. My mother once shared a story with me that has haunted my dreams ever since. A story of one fateful night from her youth and the lingering mystery that only deepened with time. She told me that when she and her best friend, let's call her Lisa, were teenagers, they spent one balmy summer evening atop the roof of Lisa's house. It was a clear night, the stars shining like scattered diamonds against an endless velvet sky. They had climbed up there simply to escape the confines of their small town, to feel closer to something beyond the ordinary. Wrapped in the warmth of youthful daring, they lay side by side, whispering about life and the secrets the universe might hold. Then, suddenly, a brilliant light appeared, a radiant, almost blinding orb that descended silently from the heavens. Neither of them could say exactly where it came from or what it was, only that it filled the sky with an intensity that made the stars seem like distant, unimportant specks. For what felt like a mere 15 minutes, they sat in stunned silence on that roof, watching as the light danced and pulsed above them. Yet, when the orb vanished, an eerie stillness replaced its presence, and they discovered that the world around them had inexplicably shifted. My mother recalled that in what they perceived as a brief moment on the roof, nearly 3 hours had slipped by. Time had stretched and warped into something unrecognizable. In the haze that followed, my mother remembered nothing of what transpired during those lost hours. Lisa, on the other hand, would only mutter vague responses like, "I don't know," whenever the topic arose. And then she would drop it entirely. The incident became a silent fissure in their shared past, a memory too disturbing and inexplicable to fully comprehend. A few months later, circumstances forced my mother to move away from that small town, and with the passage of time, she lost contact with Lisa for nearly 10 years. Life went on, and the mystery of that night settled into a murmur at the back of her mind, an unsolved riddle of her youth that she rarely revisited. But fate has a way of unearthing secrets. When years later my mother reconnected with Lisa, she was immediately struck by how altered her old friend seemed. Lisa carried herself with a distant, dreamy demeanor, as though she existed partly in another realm. There was a profound calm about her, a serene acceptance that bordered on the otherworldly, and it unsettled my mother to no end. During their reunion, after exchanging cautious pleasantries and recounting the mundane details of their intervening years, the subject of that long-ago night surfaced. Lisa hesitated at first, her eyes darting away as if the memory was too raw to confront. My mother confessed that she still remembered almost nothing of that eerie evening, while Lisa's expression shifted as she began to recall every fragment in startling clarity. Lisa described how, at first, the memory was nothing more than scattered, confusing bits, a feverish dream she couldn't piece together, filled with both terror and a strange, inexplicable fascination. But over time, as if some hidden door in her mind had been unlocked, the recollections sharpened. She remembered not only that initial encounter on the roof, but also that she had been taken, abducted in fact, 3 more times in the years that followed. And her voice trembled as she recounted the subsequent abductions. In the first of these later events, she recalled being rendered completely paralyzed, her body immobile while they performed invasive experiments. The memory was fragmented and disturbing, a haze of cold metal, sterile lights, and an overwhelming sense of violation. But the most harrowing of all was the most recent abduction. During that encounter, instead of subjecting her to further probing, the beings communicated with her. They did not speak in any language my mother could understand, yet Lisa insisted that she comprehended every word they conveyed. Their voices were not words as we know them. They were a series of clicks and resonant tones that bypassed speech altogether, speaking directly to her mind. They spoke of the cosmos, of Earth's fragile place within an infinite universe, and they revealed startling prophecies. Lisa remembered with chilling clarity how they predicted that years later she would become pregnant in a specific year, but that the child would be stillborn. They warned her that she would never be able to bear children again. In a tone that was both remorseful and detached, they insisted that the tragedy was not entirely their fault. They had attempted, in their own incomprehensible way, to save her from this fate, but their efforts had failed. And, as if that revelation were not enough, they added a final, shattering detail. They had abducted my mother as well. Another event that my mother had no memory of, except for recurring nightmares. that she dismissed as nothing more than dreams born of stress. Lisa's eyes grew distant as she continued. Every time she encountered these beings, every time she was taken, she claimed that she came to understand more of the truth about the universe, a truth that defied human logic and reshaped her perception of reality. When my mother, desperate for answers, asked what that truth was, Lisa only whispered, "You will know eventually," and she added, as if in a final, cryptic benediction, that once she had fully embraced that truth, everything in her life became wonderfully clear, a peace that transcended the horrors of what she had endured. Over the years, my mother saw Lisa a few more times, each meeting leaving her with more questions than answers. Lisa, despite the unsettling nature of her experiences, had managed to forge a life that appeared remarkably normal. She did not dwell on the alien abductions or speak obsessively about them. Instead, she brought them up only in passing, as if they were ephemeral fragments of a half-remembered dream, a secret part of her past that, while profound, did not define her daily existence. Listening to my mother recount this tale now, I am struck by the vast chasm between what we perceive as reality and the unfathomable truths that might lurk beyond our understanding. It is a story of terror and mystery, of memories that twist and warp the fabric of time, and of encounters that leave us forever changed. I still find myself questioning the nature of those experiences, wondering if there is a cosmic explanation that transcends our limited human perspective. And while my mother and Lisa continue to live their lives, seemingly ordinary and calm, I cannot help but feel that, somewhere out there, a secret truth awaits discovery. A truth that, once known, might render the mundane world we call home entirely unrecognizable. Redditor to I've seen a few strange things in my life, but none have shaken me quite like the day at the old Einel in Idaho. I was 12 years old, and that day remains seared into my memory, a day when the ordinary world split open and revealed something utterly inexplicable. I still live in a place that feels like the middle of nowhere, a barren stretch where the past lingers like a ghost. The Iniel, as it was once known, sat isolated in this desolation, a relic of a time when military labs and nuclear engineering experiments were the order of the day. Even after the lab closed, the area continued to breed strange occurrences, as if the land itself remembered the secrets it once held. It was a clear, blazing afternoon around 2 p.m., the kind of day where every detail is etched sharply against the blue of the sky. My mother and I were driving along a lonely backcountry road, the heat shimmering over the asphalt, and the distant mountains standing silent as sentinels. I remember the air was still, heavy with the scent of sagebrush and the faint tang of metal, a reminder of the lab's lingering presence. As we approached the Inel, my eyes were drawn to an unusual glint in the distance, something that didn't belong to the mundane scenery of dust and scrub. From the highway, in the general direction of the Inel, I saw it. A goddamned UFO. There it was, a spinning silver disc that defied every expectation of how a craft should behave. It hovered above the main building, its metallic surface reflecting the sunlight in dazzling bursts that sent ripples of unease through my chest. I leaned forward, squinting to catch every detail of its eerie dance. The disc was perfectly circular, rotating slowly, as though it were surveying the land below with an indifferent curiosity. I nudged my mother and asked, wide-eyed, "Mom, do you see that?" She followed my trembling finger, and her eyes widened in disbelief as she too caught sight of the strange object. Without a word, we pulled off the highway into a rest area about 5 miles from the Inel. I can still recall the surreal mix of shock and excitement that pulsed through my veins as we parked and joined a growing crowd of others who had gathered there. At the rest area, the atmosphere was electric. A mix of whispered theories and frantic photo-taking. People milled about in clusters, their faces a blend of awe, fear, and incredulity. Everyone seemed to have witnessed the same miraculous moment, a silver saucer hovering like a giant spinning teacup above the crumbling facade of the INL's main building. The craft wasn't merely stationary. It circled around what looked like the lab's reactor, its path deliberate and unsettling. I remember the way it lowered ever so slowly behind a massive concrete wall, as if performing a final, cryptic gesture before its departure. For what seemed like an eternity, though in truth it was less than 3 minutes, the UFO maintained its silent vigil. In that brief window, the rest stop transformed into a congregation of startled onlookers, each of us united by a shared, unspoken question. What in the world had we just seen? Some folks were frantically snapping pictures, their cameras clicking like a staccato heartbeat against the overwhelming stillness of the moment. Others simply stared upward, transfixed and mute, as the silver disk spun against the pristine sky. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the craft began to move. It shot off into the wide-open sky with a smoothness and speed that defied all logic. It accelerated so rapidly that it shrank to a pinpoint, then vanished completely, leaving behind an aching void and a sky that seemed to mourn its departure. The departure was so abrupt, so flawlessly executed, that even now I struggled to reconcile its motion with the laws of physics. In the blink of an eye, the craft was gone, leaving us all with a silence so profound that even the rustling of the wind seemed to pause in reverence. The collective reaction was a jumble of exclamations and quiet murmurs. I remember feeling a strange mix of terror and wonder, an emotion so raw it seemed to seep into my very bones. My mother, ever the voice of reason in moments of chaos, tried to calm the crowd while her eyes betrayed a lingering uncertainty. The event had been witnessed by many, a veritable assembly of souls drawn together by the inexplicable, and yet, as we slowly dispersed from the rest stop, the questions it raised remained unsolved. In the days that followed, that singular encounter at the NOL would become a story repeated over and over, a tale of a spinning silver saucer witnessed by a small community in the middle of nowhere. I would hear it recounted in hushed tones at family gatherings, at school, and even in late-night conversations with neighbors who claimed to have experienced similar phenomena in that desolate stretch of land. Despite the many retellings, my memory of that afternoon was as vivid as if it had happened only yesterday. The relentless heat of the sun, the quiet murmur of voices filled with awe, and that impossible craft hovering like a specter over a relic of a bygone era. I never did get a rational explanation for what I saw. I wasn't good with physics or technical jargon, but even the simplest logic couldn't account for the smooth elegance with which the UFO departed. It wasn't a clumsy, haphazard flight. It was as if it had been designed by a force that understood the very fabric of space and time. That day, in that isolated corner of Idaho, I witnessed something that transcended the ordinary. A moment when the veil between the known and the unknown was lifted, if only for a few fleeting minutes. Even now, as an adult, I sometimes find myself scanning the horizon with a lingering hope or dread that I might once again catch a glimpse of that spinning silver disk. It's a memory that haunts me not with fear alone, but with a profound sense of wonder and a relentless drive to understand the mysteries that lie just beyond our reach. The encounter at the NL remains my most vivid, shared experience, a reminder that in the vast, lonely stretches of our world, there are still secrets that defy explanation, silently waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to look up. Redditor 3. I've never told anyone this before, but that night still burns in my memory. It was around 4 a.m. a time when the world is silent and dreams blur into reality. I'd just gotten out of bed to pee, the cool darkness of my apartment wrapping around me as I shuffled to the bathroom. Half awake, I opened the door and peered out the small window. There, suspended in the vast inky sky, was a huge ball of light. It wasn't like any blinking beacon or airplane I'd seen before. No stuttering flashes, no wings, nothing mechanical about it. It simply hovered, its glow steady and inexplicably intense. My heart thudded in my chest as I stood there, transfixed by the surreal sight. I couldn't tear my eyes away. The light seemed to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm, inviting and terrifying all at once. Unsure if my mind was playing tricks on me, I bolted back to my room and woke my girlfriend. Her eyes, still heavy with sleep, widened in alarm as I breathlessly recounted what I'd just witnessed. Together we hurried back to the bathroom window. This time, our shock doubled. Where there had been one solitary orb, there were now two luminous spheres. They hung across the sky from one another, distant yet eerily synchronized. As we watched, the two lights began drifting toward each other, as if drawn by an invisible force. The air grew thick with tension, and every instinct screamed that something monumental was about to occur. I remember the slow, almost deliberate convergence, the orbs gliding through the darkness, inch by inch, until they seemed on the brink of collision. In that moment, time slowed, and the silence around us became oppressive. The boundary between reality and the inexplicable blurred as the two lights neared one another, their edges almost touching in a cosmic embrace that defied all logic. Panic erupted in us. With hearts pounding and adrenaline surging, we turned and fled back to the safety of our bedroom, our footsteps and terrified screams echoing in the quiet corridors of our home. We didn't stop until we were locked inside, the surreal horror of what we'd witnessed hammering at our minds. After a few agonizing minutes, when the fear had finally subsided into a trembling calm, I mustered the courage to return to the bathroom window. My hand still shook as I approached, expecting to see the two converging orbs still dominating the sky. But when I looked up, there was nothing. No mysterious lights, no lingering glow, just the vast, empty night. It was as if the entire encounter had been erased, leaving behind only a void and a lingering sense of dread. I still lie awake sometimes, haunted by that inexplicable moment in the early hours of the morning. A moment when the sky opened up to reveal a mystery beyond our understanding. And though the orbs vanish without a trace, their memory remains, a silent, chilling reminder that on some nights, the line between our world and the unknown can blur in the blink of an eye. Redditor 4. I've never told anyone this before, but there's one memory that refuses to fade. A memory from my junior year in high school, during the 4th of July parade that we all looked forward to each year. I was in marching band, as I had been for all 4 years, and that day everything felt ordinary at first. We went through our usual routine, warm-ups, getting into formation, and then marching to our designated waiting spot, until it was our turn to join the parade. I wasn't near any of my friends that day, so I found myself standing quietly, mostly observing the world around me as groups of people chatted and joked to pass the time. The sky above was unlike anything I had ever seen. A deep, unbroken blue that stretched endlessly overhead, not a single cloud marring its perfection. I remember standing there, my gaze wandering upward, completely entranced by that flawless expanse. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, two circular, silver objects appeared, moving side by side against the brilliant backdrop of the sky. They were perfectly round, gleaming like polished metal in the sunlight. Their motion was unlike any aircraft or balloon I had ever seen. At the altitude of a normal passenger plane, they sliced through the air with a speed so incredible it was almost as if they were swiping across the sky with the swift flick of a finger. No matter how fast they moved, they maintained a constant distance from each other, never drawing closer, never drifting apart, just moving in perfect, unchanging unison. For a full 15 seconds, I stood there transfixed. Every second felt both eternal and impossibly brief as I watched them glide effortlessly, their surfaces catching the light in dazzling, almost hypnotic flashes. I wanted to call out, to point someone over to witness this surreal display, but when I turned to alert a nearby bandmate, they were gone. In the blink of an eye, the sky that had been so clear and vivid now offered no hint of the mysterious objects that had just danced across it. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the horizon, struggling to accept what I had seen. I was 100% sober that day. There was no substance, no trick of the mind, just a startling encounter with something I still can't explain. The memory of that moment clings to me, a puzzle that defies every rational explanation. Was it a secret military experiment, a trick of the light, or something altogether otherworldly? In the days that followed, I replayed the vision over and over in my mind. The parade resumed as scheduled, the familiar rhythms of marching and cheering filling the air, but my thoughts kept returning to that flawless blue sky and those two silver spheres gliding silently above it. I questioned everything I thought I knew about the world. That one brief, inexplicable moment shattered the comfortable certainty of routine and reminded me that, sometimes, the universe reveals secrets just beyond the edge of our understanding. Even now, whenever I catch a glimpse of a clear, cloudless sky, I can't help but search for a sign, a flash of silver, a whisper of movement that might reconnect me with that mysterious day. I never did learn what those objects were, and perhaps that mystery is meant to linger, a silent reminder that there are still things in this world that defy explanation. And so I carry that memory with me, a blend of wonder and unease, knowing that no matter how much we think we understand, the universe still holds secrets waiting to be discovered in the most unexpected moments. Redditor 5. I've never told anyone this before, but back in the early ADS, my friends and I were hooked on astronomy, a passion that led us to spend countless nights in the pitch-black countryside, far away from city lights. Those nights, under an endless vault of stars, we witnessed phenomena that defied every logical explanation we had learned from textbooks. We knew the predictable paths of faint satellites tracing straight lines across the sky, but every so often, brighter lights appeared, solo or in mysterious formations, and they moved in ways that no human-made craft ever could. I remember one evening particularly well. The air was cool and still as we set out with our modest telescopes, eager to observe the wonders of the cosmos. The sky was a pristine canvas, and as we turned our instruments toward the heavens, we saw lights that danced with wild abandon. One moment they moved in smooth, sweeping arcs, the next they zigzagged erratically, as if testing the very limits of gravity. Their hues shifted from icy blues to fiery reds, and sometimes a lone white orb would appear out of nowhere, hovering silently before darting off into the darkness. We would exchange baffled glances, our youthful minds trying to make sense of what our eyes could not fully comprehend. On another occasion, we had gathered on a clear, crisp night to observe the moon, a familiar, reassuring presence in the sky. That evening, as we peered through our telescopes with a mix of anticipation and casual curiosity, something truly surreal unfolded. There, above the lunar surface, a distinct craft emerged, gliding just over the cratered terrain. It moved with an elegance that belied any known human technology, its trajectory following curves that no conventional aircraft could muster. For a few agonizing moments, we were transfixed, mesmerized by the sight of what appeared to be an object from another world, silently conducting its own enigmatic ballet across the face of the moon. But nothing could compare to what we experienced on a bright, seemingly ordinary day in the city, a day when the unexpected shattered the illusion of normalcy. I remember it vividly. The sun was high, the urban skyline thrumming with the energy of everyday life, and yet amidst the clamor, a distant, turbine-like hum began to rise above the mundane noise of traffic. My friends and I, having gathered for an impromptu daytime observation session, looked up, and what we saw left us speechless. High above, roughly 2,000 feet in the air, a gray, round saucer materialized out of nowhere. Its surface was smooth and unblemished, reflecting the harsh light in a manner that was both eerily subtle and profoundly unsettling. For what felt like an eternity, that saucer glided across the sky in perfect silence. There were no visible wings or blinking lights, only a cold, metallic presence moving with a precision that defied our understanding of physics. It passed directly over us, as if acknowledging our presence for a fleeting moment before disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The sound, a low, resonant turbine hum, faded into silence, leaving behind a crowd of stunned onlookers and a lingering question that none of us could answer. Back in the rural darkness of those early nights, we speculated endlessly. Some of us wondered if the erratic, colorful lights were secret military experiments, craft designed to test technologies far ahead of their time. Others entertained the more unthinkable possibility that these objects were not of this world, hints of a vast unseen cosmos populated by beings whose intentions we could neither fathom nor predict. Despite our best efforts to rationalize the sightings, every observation chipped away at the comfortable boundaries of what we believed to be possible. I remember one night lying on a blanket in a remote field, staring up at the heavens, so clear and deep that the stars seemed to whisper ancient secrets. As we shared stories of the inexplicable, of lights that danced like living, breathing entities and shapes that defied logic, a sense of profound wonder settled over us. There was a palpable tension in the air, a collective understanding that what we were witnessing was a glimpse into a reality far more complex and mysterious than the one we inhabited by day. Even as the years passed and life took us on divergent paths, the memories of those nights remained etched in my mind. I still find myself gazing upward on clear, starry evenings, half expecting to see that brilliant, erratic dance of lights again. The universe, with its infinite expanse and secrets hidden in every dark corner, continues to challenge the boundaries of my understanding. Looking back now, I realize that those experiences, as inexplicable as they were, taught me a simple yet profound lesson: that our world is only a small fragment of a far grander, unfathomable cosmos. The ordinary and the extraordinary coexist in delicate balance, and sometimes, just when you think you've seen it all, the universe reminds you that there is always more, always another mystery waiting to be unveiled. I don't claim to have all the answers. Perhaps those lights were nothing more than natural phenomena we were too young or too inexperienced to fully understand. Or perhaps they were messages from a realm that exists just beyond the veil of our perception, hints of a cosmic conversation that spans the vast distances between stars. All I know is that those nights under the open sky changed me. They filled me with both awe and a lingering, unshakable curiosity, a desire to question, to explore, and to never stop looking up. In every clear, cloudless night that follows, as I trace the familiar paths of satellites and listen for the faint hum of distant engines, I hold onto the memory of those early days of wonder. They serve as a constant reminder that while we may seek to tame the mysteries of the universe with our knowledge and technology, some secrets are meant to remain elusive, whispering to us from the infinite dark, urging us to dream beyond the limits of what we think we know. Redditor 6. There was one night 2 summers ago in California that still sends shivers down my spine every time I think back on it. We were in a small town where power outages had become a regular, albeit inconvenient, occurrence. The darkness that fell over our neighborhood during those outages had an odd sort of allure, an invitation to step outside and lose oneself under the infinite canopy of stars. With the power out and the usual distractions silenced, the night felt pure, almost magical. On that particular night, I found myself in the backyard, armed with my husband's night scope. He'd always been fascinated by the mysteries of the cosmos, and I'd grown accustomed to our impromptu stargazing sessions during these blackouts. The world around me was hushed. Only the distant chirrups of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the trees accompanied me as I adjusted the focus on the scope. I was intent on tracking a satellite, a tiny, unassuming point of light moving steadily across the inky backdrop of space. Its slow, predictable drift had become almost hypnotic in the silent dark. I remember the moment with perfect clarity. I was carefully tracking this lone satellite when something utterly bizarre happened. As I watched through the lens, the object, which had been gliding gracefully in a straight line toward the west, suddenly executed a flawless 90-degree turn. And I don't mean it curved gently or drifted slowly into a new course. I'm talking about an instantaneous, precise pivot, as if the satellite had hit an invisible wall and bounced off, rerouting itself directly north. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment time seemed to freeze. I squinted into the night, struggling to process what I had just seen. I recalibrated the focus of the night scope, convinced that perhaps my eyes were playing tricks on me or that some optical illusion had momentarily taken hold. But there it was. No hesitance, no gradual arc, just a stark, sudden change in trajectory. One moment it was heading west, and in the blink of an eye it was zipping northward with a speed that belied its previous leisurely pace. The air felt charged as I watched, a current of inexplicable energy pulsing through the darkness around me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the scope, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What kind of object could maneuver with such precision? Was it really a satellite or something entirely different? Something that defied the rigid laws of physics I thought I knew so well? I moved closer to the night scope, my hands trembling slightly as I adjusted the lens to get a better look. The object maintained its new course, a silver glint moving effortlessly against the backdrop of countless stars. It wasn't accompanied by the familiar steady hum or predictable rotation of human-made satellites. Instead, its motion was unnervingly deliberate, as if it were responding to some hidden command or force. The clarity of the night, with its unblemished blue-black sky and countless pinpricks of light, only magnified the strangeness of what I was witnessing. In that moment, I couldn't help but think about all the stories I'd heard over the years. Tales of unexplained aerial phenomena, whispered legends of crafts that defied conventional explanation. I had always been a skeptic, dismissing such stories as fanciful flights of imagination. But here, in the dead of a power outage night, staring through a nightscope at an object that pivoted a perfect 90 degrees, skepticism gave way to a mingling of awe and dread. I remember my pulse pounding in my ears, my mind racing to connect this singular, inexplicable maneuver to any known law of motion. I recalled the steady, predictable orbits of satellites, their movements governed by the unyielding pull of gravity and the mechanics of their launch. But this object seemed to disregard all that. It was as if it had a mind of its own, a will that allowed it to alter its path with an almost conscious decision. For what felt like an eternity, I watched in silence, mesmerized by this cosmic anomaly. The object continued its journey northward, maintaining a constant speed and a trajectory that was nothing short of extraordinary. I could almost imagine it moving with an intelligence far beyond our comprehension, its sudden change of direction a calculated maneuver rather than a random fluke of nature. Eventually, the object began to recede into the distance, gradually fading from view as it blended back into the sea of stars. I sat there, rooted to the spot, the image of that perfect 90-degree turn seared into my memory. The silence of the night resumed its hold, but my mind was buzzing with questions that I knew would have no easy answers. I carefully documented what I had seen in a small notebook I always kept for such inexplicable events, hoping that perhaps one day I might piece together some rationale for that surreal moment. After a while, I reluctantly tore my gaze from the scope and stepped back inside, where the sporadic glow of a battery-powered lamp offered little comfort compared to the vast, mysterious sky outside. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just witnessed something that was not meant to be understood by ordinary eyes. A fleeting glimpse into a reality that operates on a different set of rules. In the days that followed, I spoke about the experience with a few close friends, hoping to find solace or at least validation in their own curious encounters with the unexplained. Some brushed it off as a trick of the light or a momentary lapse in perception, while others listened intently, their eyes reflecting a shared sense of wonder and disbelief. But deep down, I knew what I had seen was indisputable. It was as real as the stars above, and its defiant maneuver had etched itself into my consciousness. Even now, whenever I find myself under a clear, starlit sky, I can't help but search for that same glint of silver. I've learned to accept that there are mysteries in this universe that defy our neat categories and simple explanations, mysteries that sometimes reveal themselves in the most unexpected ways. That night, with its power outages and silent, watchful stars, reminded me that our understanding of the cosmos is but a small fragment of what truly exists out there. And though I may never fully comprehend the forces that orchestrated that perfect 90-degree turn, I remain forever changed by the experience, a quiet testament to the infinite wonders that lie just beyond our reach. Redditor 7. That night during the last meteor shower of 2015 still burns in my memory. It was around midnight, maybe a little past 12, when my girlfriend and I decided to step outside into the cool open air. The power was out, which meant the usual distractions were gone, and the sky was a pristine canvas of deep, endless blue. I've always loved watching the stars, but that night, the heavens put on a show that I'll never forget. We spread out a blanket in our backyard, the quiet enveloping us as we lay there side by side. Meteors began streaking across the sky in brilliant bursts of light, each one a fleeting work of art that left behind a trail of wonder. My girlfriend, who'd never shown much interest in space before, was completely captivated by the display. Her eyes widened with each shimmering streak, and for a few moments, the simple magic of a meteor shower was enough to silence every other thought. Then, as if the universe had another surprise in store, I noticed something unusual. While tracking what I assumed was a satellite, a tiny, predictable point of light moving steadily westward. A glimmer caught my eye. I adjusted the focus on the scope my husband had stashed away, and what I saw made my heart skip a beat. Out there, in the midst of the meteor spectacle, appeared a small pack of objects, moving in perfect unison. At first, I thought they were just another cluster of meteors, but these were different. There were about 5 or 6 of them, each circular and silver, and they moved in ways no human-made craft ever could. For a full 10 to 15 seconds, they danced across the sky. I watched, spellbound, as they maintained a flawless formation. No erratic zigzags, no faltering drift. They moved as if they were alive, responding to an unspoken command, and then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they flew off into the darkness. I couldn't help but call my girlfriend's attention to them. "Look at that," I whispered, my voice trembling with excitement. But as soon as I looked back up, the mysterious objects had vanished. Then, in a blink, they popped back into view for another few seconds, almost as if they were playing a cosmic game of hide-and-seek, before disappearing completely. The entire encounter lasted only a few minutes, yet it felt like an eternity, suspended in a moment of pure wonder. When we finally headed back inside, I couldn't stop grinning. I told her, "Those were UFOs to us," and added with a laugh, "Maybe they were just a group of alien friends driving around in their personal spaceships, using the meteor shower as an excuse to drop by and check out Earth. So damn cool, right?" Her laughter filled the room, mingling with the lingering thrill of that unexplainable night. Even now, whenever I find myself gazing up at a clear, star-studded sky, I can't help but wonder if those little visitors might one day return. That night reminded me that the universe still holds secrets, tiny mysteries drifting among meteors and stars, just waiting for someone to look up and notice. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when you least expect them, turning an ordinary night into something truly unforgettable. Redditor 8. I remember that summer of '81 in rural Montgomery County, Indiana, like a page torn from a forgotten diary. A day of brilliant sunlight, endless blue skies, and a moment that forever altered my understanding of the world. I was a kid back then, carefree and curious, playing in the front lawn of our neighbor's house with my older brother Pat. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the hum of distant farm equipment, and every day felt like an adventure waiting to unfold. Our neighbor's house, with its wide, welcoming porch and neatly trimmed hedges, was our playground. That day, however, the clear, cloudless sky held a secret that would outshine even the brightest of Indiana summers. My father, an Indiana state trooper at the time, had instilled in us a healthy respect for order and a keen awareness of the world beyond our small town. Because of his work, we'd grown up surrounded by helicopters and the occasional buzz of military vehicles, a constant reminder of authority and the mysteries of modern machinery. We knew how helicopters hovered, how their massive rotors churned the air, and how their powerful engines filled the sky with noise and wind. It was a familiar sound, one that usually brought comfort, not alarm. That afternoon, as Pat and I were racing each other around the yard and imagining grand adventures, something unusual caught our eyes. We both glanced upward, our gazes fixated on the left side of the roof of our neighbor's house. There, suspended against the perfect blue backdrop, were two silver saucers. They floated silently, their surfaces gleaming with an otherworldly shine, slowly rotating as if in some deliberate, graceful dance. The sight was so unexpected that our young hearts skipped a beat. We were only about 300 yards away, roughly 100 meters, if you're more accustomed to that measure, and yet the saucers seemed impossibly close. One of them hung slightly higher than the other, their edges almost overlapping, creating a formation that hinted at an unspoken connection. For a few minutes, we stood there in wide-eyed silence, the world around us fading away, until all that existed was the slow, mesmerizing spin of these mysterious discs. The saucers didn't emit the familiar rumble of a helicopter, nor did they produce the whir of rotating blades. There was a profound silence about them, a stillness that was as unnerving as it was beautiful. Their rotations were smooth and methodical, in stark contrast to the clunky, predictable motion of the aircraft we knew so well from Dad's stories and our backyard experiences. It was as if these objects had come from a different realm, a realm where the rules of physics were rewritten with each graceful turn. As the minutes ticked by, something in the air shifted. The once languid motion of the saucers gave way to a sudden burst of energy. Without warning, both discs accelerated, moving with a speed that belied their earlier calm. They shot off toward the east in a flash, their departure as abrupt as it was inexplicable. In one fleeting moment, the objects that had captured our imaginations and held us spellbound were gone, leaving only the lingering echo of a mystery too big for our young minds to comprehend. Pat and I didn't waste a second. Our legs carried us in a mad dash toward the house, hearts pounding in our chests as we burst through the front door. Breathless and wide-eyed, we recounted every detail to our parents. Our words tumbled out in a frantic rush. A description of 2 silver saucers, slowly rotating and then vanishing in a burst of speed that defied explanation. The sheer intensity of our excitement and terror was palpable, and we could see the incredulous expressions on our parents' faces. They listened intently, nodding slowly, as if trying to piece together the fragments of our story. Perhaps it was the influence of our upbringing around state troopers and helicopters that lent our tale an air of credibility, or maybe it was simply the unmistakable conviction in our voices. Either way, they didn't dismiss it as a figment of our imaginations. Instead, they shared in our astonishment, recalling stories of strange sights and unexplained occurrences from their own lives. Stories that had been whispered in the quiet hours of long, lonely nights. In the years that followed, that single, perfectly clear day became a touchstone for both wonder and doubt in my life. I would often find myself gazing up at the sky, remembering the brilliant light of those silver saucers, and wondering if they were real or merely a trick of the light. The memory stayed with me, a subtle reminder that even in the mundane rhythm of everyday life, the extraordinary can sometimes slip in without warning. Late at night, as I lie awake under a canopy of stars, I still feel that same childlike awe and confusion. Was it really 2 alien crafts slowly rotating in the heavens, or just a trick of the summer heat and a mind eager for mystery? I sometimes ponder whether the saucers were a message from beyond, a fleeting glimpse into a world where the impossible becomes possible, if only for a few precious minutes. Even now, I cannot shake the feeling that those silver discs were not a dream. Pat was there to witness every moment, and our parents' shared memory confirmed the truth of that day. It was a moment of pure, unfiltered wonder, a moment when the world opened up and revealed a secret that defied all explanation. If it hadn't been for my brother's presence, if our parents had not taken our frightened accounts seriously, I might have eventually dismissed it as a bizarre, half-remembered dream. That day in rural Montgomery County remains a defining chapter in my life, a time when the familiar turned fantastical and the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary blurred. It is a memory that I carry with me, etched deeply into the fabric of who I am, a reminder that sometimes the universe has surprises in store for us, hidden in the light of a perfectly clear Indiana sky. Redditor 9. I'll never forget that day in the middle of a relentless wildfire just south of the Dugway Proving Grounds. It was a scorching summer afternoon in Utah. No, it was more like a nightmare that unfolded in real time. I was on a fire rig, part of a tight convoy of 4 trucks, all rumbling down a lonely backcountry road toward an incident area that reeked of smoke and danger. We were a small, enclosed group, our vehicles clattering over the rough terrain, when suddenly the sound of rotors cut through the low hum of our engines. Out of nowhere, 8 black military helicopters appeared on the horizon, their blades slicing the air in a formation so precise it sent a chill through me. They escorted us for what felt like 10 miles, an eerie, inescapable procession that made our convoy seem insignificant against the might of their shadow. At first, I figured they were just running drills or using us as part of some simulated target practice. After all, in a place like this, where wildfires and military installations merge into one chaotic landscape, nothing truly strange seems out of place. We eventually pulled over, our rigs hissing as the engines cooled. The plan was to hike to the fire line and help contain the blaze that was eating through the brush. As we disembarked, the heavy weight of the day's heat and the lingering adrenaline made each step feel surreal. We were all silent for a moment, letting the reality of our task settle in, when a sudden burst of movement snapped us to attention. Far off, a good mile away, a thin column of smoke shot straight into the sky, reaching approximately 200 feet high. The explosion of sound that accompanied it was startling, a deep, resonant concussion that rolled over us like a shockwave. For an instant, the natural noise of the wildfire and the distant crackle of flames was replaced by an overwhelming boom that vibrated through our chests. I looked around, my senses on high alert, trying to reconcile the booming disturbance with the crackling inferno already at work. We all knew we were near a strike zone, but nothing could have prepared us for that moment. Just 5 minutes after that explosive burst, something even more impossible happened. As I stood there, the sweat and dust clinging to my skin, an aircraft, like nothing I have ever seen before, flew by at an altitude of roughly 500 feet. It was flat black, almost ominously so, and had a rectangular shape accented by fins and odd well-like protrusions on its underside. The thing moved with a deliberate slowness that defied logic, its motion eerily silent despite its apparent size. In that moment, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. It looked like a stealth glider straight out of a Tim Burton film, reminiscent of a gigantic, brooding Batmobile hovering on the edge of reality. The sight of that aircraft sent an indescribable shiver down my spine. It was as if it had emerged from the very shadows of the fire, a spectral presence that was both a harbinger of danger and an enigma I couldn't comprehend. I could see it clearly against the backdrop of the wildfire's glow, a dark, unyielding shape moving with a precision that no conventional machine could muster. It felt as though time slowed down for those few seconds, the world around me muffled into silence as I tried desperately to process what I was witnessing. No sooner had I registered that moment than our radios crackled to life. Military personnel, their voices clipped and urgent, began transmitting commands on our frequency. At first, the messages were vague, just orders to evacuate the area immediately. When our crew chief questioned the sudden directive, the incident commander himself came on the radio with a terse explanation. We were being pulled out for our own safety, a high-priority evacuation that left no room for further question. Within minutes, our crew was herded back into our trucks. The sense of confusion was overwhelming. If the military wanted us out of harm's way, why hadn't they already cordoned off the area? Why did we, the ones on the ground fighting a raging wildfire, have to witness these inexplicable phenomena? I couldn't shake the thought that perhaps the entire situation had been orchestrated in a moment of desperate urgency, a breakdown in communication, or, worse, a cover-up for something far more sinister. We were rerouted to a completely different fire, about 100 miles to the south. The ride there was a jumbled mix of tense silence and frantic speculation. I kept replaying the events in my head, the escort of black helicopters, the sudden column of smoke that blasted the air, and that impossibly silent, sleek aircraft that glided by as if it were a ghost. By the time we arrived at the new location, the wildfire we had been sent to battle had already been subdued, and we were relegated to mop-up operations. A stark contrast to the adrenaline-charged moments we had just endured. Throughout the incident, I couldn't help but wonder about the true nature of what we had seen. If the military was so intent on removing us from the area, was it because they feared we might witness something dangerous or classified? Did they not trust us to understand, or perhaps, were they hiding something far bigger than a simple wildfire response? The questions gnawed at me like an insistent, unyielding itch. Every detail, the precise formation of the helicopters, the sudden, powerful column of smoke, the silent, dark glider, seemed to hint at a larger mystery that transcended the mundane operations of wildfire management. As the days turned into weeks, I found no clear answers. Some colleagues brushed off the events as mere coincidences, a series of unfortunate timing and miscommunication. Others, however, shared my unease, muttering about hidden projects or secret operations conducted under the guise of routine drills. The closest explanation I've come across is that our unit was unwittingly caught in the crossfire of a now classified situation, a scenario where higher priority events demanded immediate evacuation, leaving us with nothing more than a series of cryptic signals and unanswered questions. Every time I think back on that day, the memory is a patchwork of sensory details. The roar of the helicopters, the shock wave of that bizarre smoke burst, and the silent, almost otherworldly flight of that aircraft. It's a memory that blurs the line between a high-stakes military operation and an encounter with something not of this world. Even now, when the night is clear and the desert air is still, I can almost hear the low thrum of those rotors and see, if only for a fleeting moment, that black glider slicing through the sky. I sometimes wonder if we were all just pawns in a larger game, a scenario where the truth is hidden in plain sight, wrapped in the guise of routine emergencies and emergency evacuations. The military's abrupt intervention left us with more questions than answers. A lingering sense that there was something out there, something that was too dangerous or too extraordinary for ordinary eyes. And even though I've tried to rationalize it as a series of unfortunate coincidences, the memory of that day remains a stubborn reminder that, sometimes, reality is far more complex and far more frightening than we are ever prepared to believe. I still don't have a definitive answer. All I know is that on that day, in the heart of a blazing wildfire and amidst the chaos of military intervention, I witnessed things that defied easy explanation. And even as I live my life far removed from that searing desert, the echoes of that experience continue to haunt me, a silent testament to the mysteries that linger just beyond the reach of our understanding. Redditor 10. I still remember that warm, sunlit afternoon as if it were yesterday. I was riding in the passenger seat on our drive back home from my aunt's house, the golden light of the day bathing everything in a soft, familiar glow. The road stretched out before us in a gentle ribbon of asphalt, and for a few blissful moments, everything felt perfectly ordinary. Then, almost without warning, an object appeared in the sky, just a little to our left. I remember the way it caught the light. It had that classic, unmistakable saucer shape, its smooth metallic surface shimmering brilliantly as the sun reflected off it. I froze, my eyes widening in disbelief. My mom, sitting beside me, did the same. In that instant, we both knew we weren't witnessing an airplane or even a flock of geese. This was something entirely. For a few seconds, we sat in silent awe, simply staring out the window at the mysterious craft. There was something almost hypnotic about the way it floated there in the clear blue sky. We drove a little further down the road, unable to tear our gaze away, our minds trying to make sense of the impossible sight before us. Every now and then I stole glances at my mom, whose expression mirrored my own mix of wonder and quiet astonishment. Then, as if the universe decided to play its final trick, something happened that I still can't quite believe. Out of nowhere, the object so brilliant and solid moments before began to change. In the span of a few heartbeats, it just vanished. It wasn't that it drifted slowly out of view or melted into the distance. It was as if it simply disintegrated, evaporated into thin air. I remember the shock that surged through me, a surge so sudden it left me breathless. I looked over at my mom, and in her eyes I saw the same bewilderment, the same silent confirmation that she too had witnessed the inexplicable disappearance. The experience left a lingering question that has haunted me ever since. I have always been fascinated by UFOs and the possibility of other life in our universe. That day, when the object materialized and then dissolved before our very eyes, it confirmed everything I had ever hoped for and challenged every explanation I'd ever known. My mom and I have talked about that moment countless times since then. Even now, when we find ourselves together on quiet afternoons, the memory of that shimmering saucer in the sky never fails to spark a mix of excitement and mystery. Some people laugh when I recount this story, dismissing it as a trick of the light or an overactive imagination. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a helicopter with its predictable blades, nor was it an airplane leaving a contrail in its wake. It wasn't a natural phenomenon or even an illusion cast by the bright sun. It was, unmistakably, an object of a design that defied conventional explanation. A craft whose sudden appearance and just as sudden disappearance left us both with more questions than answers. Every time I look up at the sky now, on a clear day when the blue stretches out uninterrupted, I can't help but search for that familiar glint of silver. I wonder if it might appear again, silently gliding across the heavens, as if to remind us that there are still mysteries out there beyond our reach. And though time has passed and the memory of that afternoon has softened into a hazy recollection, the impact remains as vivid as the moment it occurred. I still talk about it with my mom, and we both agree on one thing: that day changed the way we see the world. It revealed a crack in the mundane, a glimpse into a reality where the extraordinary lurks just beyond the edge of our ordinary lives. Whether it was a visitor from another world, an experimental craft too advanced for us to comprehend, or something altogether beyond our current understanding, I know one thing for sure: I witnessed it. And that memory, as fleeting as it might have been, continues to ignite a spark of wonder deep within me. So here's my UFO story. A story not of hoaxes or wild fabrications, but of a genuine, inexplicable encounter on a warm, sunny afternoon. It's a reminder that sometimes, when you're just going about your day, the universe might decide to show you something that challenges everything you thought you knew. And for me, that moment of unanticipated wonder will forever be a testament to the mysteries that lie hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to look up and see them. Redditor 11. My life has been punctuated by moments so strange and vivid that they continue to haunt my waking hours. I can still remember the first time I saw something I couldn't explain. I was 7 years old in Houston, Texas. On warm, starry nights, I used to climb onto the roof of my mom's Suburban parked in the driveway and stare up at the heavens. One such night, I caught sight of an intensely bright, floating light hovering just over the tree line, about a half-mile away. I hollered out in excitement, but no one came to see it. That was the beginning, the first glimpse of something that would forever blur the line between dream and reality. I didn't see anything else until March of 2008, when I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. My mom lived in a garden home community where every house was the same one-story design, offering expansive, unobstructed views of the night sky. It was between the 10th and the 15th of that month. I can't recall the exact date because I spent 4 sleepless days trying to piece together what I had seen. One early morning, exactly at 4 a.m., I stepped out of my buddy's house into a brilliantly starry night. As I walked, something caught my eye off to the left. I looked up and saw a strobing light, flashing in hues of blue, yellow, green, white, red, and orange, floating silently. I stood there, transfixed, not daring to call anyone over for fear I might miss a single moment of it. I watched as the light passed in front of the moon, its outline gradually revealing the shape of a craft. It was teardrop-shaped, much like a sunflower seed, with its bright, multicolored lights seemingly transmitted from its upper half. A thin, dark line, like a smooth exhaust trail, stretched out behind it, vanishing into the darkness about 50 to 75 feet past the main body. I was no more than 400 yards away when it passed, and the sheer proximity of it left me breathless. After it disappeared behind the moon, I ran inside to grab someone. A friend saw it too, but from his vantage point, it was too distant to discern any details. I then hurried home, just a few blocks away, and from my driveway I saw something even more perplexing. A pair of dim white lights slowly creeping over the horizon in the same direction the first craft had come from. I ran back inside and woke my mom. We stood together for nearly 20 minutes, staring up in silent awe as not one, but 5 separate crafts began to fly directly over us. They arrived in a curious sequence. First 2, then another 2, and finally 1, all spaced about 6 to 7 minutes apart. They floated about 200 feet in the air, moving at a pace we estimated at roughly 20 miles per hour, and they were utterly silent. From underneath, each craft displayed 2 enormous bright white lights, each possibly 30 to 40 feet across, flanked by a pulsating red light that alternated between brightness and dimness. Judging by these luminous indicators, I'd guess each craft was around 150 to 200 feet wide. Then, the last craft drew near, flying lower and slower than the others, and suddenly it emitted a sound, a noise so loud and unnerving that it still haunts me. I can only describe it as a digital metallic link, amplified to an almost unbearable volume. It did that twice, and as it passed overhead, I felt an inexplicable acknowledgement, as though its pilot knew we were watching. I couldn't hold back my tears. I was overwhelmed by fear, confusion, and a profound sense of intrusion into a reality I wasn't meant to witness. A couple of weeks later, another experience unfolded. I was standing in my driveway at about 2 a.m. smoking a cigarette and idly watching my iPad when I decided to turn on the backlight and wave my hand in front of it, creating a makeshift strobe effect. I didn't see anything unusual at first, but then I got that unmistakable feeling of being watched. I looked directly up, and there, hovering just above me, was a craft unlike any I'd seen before. It was trapezoid-shaped with smoothly rounded edges, outlined in a pulsating dark red and black glow that rippled like flowing electricity. It was so close, I swear it was less than 75 feet above me, that I could have struck it with a rock. For 10 to 15 seconds, It hovered directly above, moving side to side, front to back in a perfectly controlled motion, never straying more than 20 feet from its original spot. Frozen with both fascination and terror, I mustered the courage to wave at it in what I hoped was a friendly gesture. In response, the craft changed its light pattern and drifted silently behind my house. That silent acknowledgement, the way it seemed to let me know it had seen me, made me wonder if it wanted me to follow it. I was too freaked out to consider that possibility at the time, but I have seen that same craft on 3 separate occasions in Tuscaloosa, in Hoover, and in Bessemer. I recall the night in Hoover vividly. I was at an apartment complex perched atop a huge hill with a breathtaking overlook. It was night, and I was with a few friends, when suddenly I spotted a gray craft, its design reminiscent of a Hoth fighter from a science fiction movie. The moment our eyes met its imposing presence, it took off rapidly to the right, vanishing into the darkness as silently as it had appeared. In both Bessemer and again in Tuscaloosa, that distinct trapezoid shape would emerge. In these sightings, the craft appeared as a solid white form, stretching to twice its original length, before its bottom section shot upward at what seemed like light speed, transforming the very geometry of the object in a heartbeat. I've also become accustomed to witnessing what I call streaks in the sky. They resemble shooting stars but move much lower, slower, and with elongated tails that stream behind them in a kaleidoscope of colors. One particularly strange episode involved a dream in Tuscaloosa. I can't say I heard or saw anything, but I felt an uncanny presence. I was lying on something cold, and I distinctly felt what seemed like a slick, rubbery substance enveloping my lower body. A sensation disturbingly similar to accounts of abduction, where people report the removal of sperm or eggs for breeding programs. I woke up shaken, and the next morning, while letting the dog out in our small backyard, I found a solid white ring in the grass, about 8 to 10 feet wide. When I showed it to my mom, she recalled hearing a noise the previous night, though she had dismissed it at the time. Another experience still stands out. One night near Shelton State Community College in the Inglewood neighborhood, my house, located less than a quarter mile from campus, became the stage for a surreal occurrence. It was nighttime, and I was in my driveway when I heard a static buzz reminiscent of a jet engine's roar. Looking up, I saw a light blue slit in the sky about 200 yards long and perfectly vertical. White electric currents seemed to cascade down from both sides of the slit. As I watched, roughly 25 small, white objects shot out from the slit, one at a time, each leaving a brief glowing trail behind. Once they passed, the bottom of the slit surged upward until the opening snapped shut with a strange final sound, leaving me with a lingering chill of disbelief. In addition to these dramatic encounters, I've seen countless orbs, some solid, illuminated spheres that float through the sky, moving in unpredictable, almost sentient patterns. Others brighten intensely for a moment before fading away, as if they're punctuating the darkness with ephemeral declarations of existence. After that first overwhelming series of experiences, I began to research obsessively, desperate for any explanation that might make sense of the myriad encounters I'd endured. I discovered accounts of UFO witnesses who called themselves contactees, people who not only see these phenomena but are followed by them, as if they're marked for some kind of cosmic rendezvous. I have no clear answer as to why I've encountered so many of these events. Perhaps in acknowledging their presence, I unknowingly invited them to stick around. A strange gift and curse all at once. I often wonder if these experiences are intertwined, pieces of a puzzle that I've been fated to slowly piece together. There are so few people who can listen without laughter or disbelief, and every time I share my story, I'm met with incredulous looks or dismissive chuckles. I've even considered seeking hypnotherapy, hoping that delving deeper into my subconscious might reveal hidden memories or truths that my waking mind refuses to acknowledge. For now, I carry these encounters as both a burden and a blessing. They remind me that our universe is far more mysterious than we're willing to admit, and that sometimes the extraordinary chooses to reveal itself to those who, perhaps unknowingly, are ready to witness it. If you have any questions about what I've shared, I'm willing to answer them. But know that this is my truth, a truth that has shaped my life in ways I'm still trying to understand.